Hey yogis, how are you all doing? So today we're going to talk about the all or none principle, which is a really cool principle in exercise physiology world, and it really does apply to yoga. So we're talking about nerve impulses coming down from the spinal cord, going to the muscles, and then that nerve impulse will then trigger the muscle to contract, and then the muscle will slide together, and the end of the muscle which connects to the bone will then get pulled upon by the muscle, and then that joint will move. Okay. So the all or none principle is basically telling us about the strength of the muscle contraction, so how much energy you put into it, how much force or not, lack of force is really dependent on the neural input, the how many action potentials are going into the muscle, and how many of the different sections of the muscle are actually getting activated or having that nerve impulse going to the muscle belly and the different sections in the muscle. Okay. So to move a joint, you have to have enough force to move the bone. So we have this gravity, which is the force that kind of keeps us on the ground, stops us floating away. If you go to the moon, you can see people bouncing around on the moon because the gravity is not as strong. So we got this force at 7.62 meters per second, which is kind of like if you drop an object. So if I drop my mouse, it'll travel down at 7.62 meters per second. And that's a constant on planet Earth. That keeps us kind of grounded on the Earth. So if I'm moving my arm up to the front, I've actually got to overcome that resistance of gravity coming down. So I have to have enough muscle contraction in my shoulder, in my deltoid, to overcome the resistance of gravity coming downwards to move my arm. And that kind of principle applies in all movements. So the muscle needs to be able to generate enough contractile strength to overcome the resistance force that it's trying to move. All right. If it doesn't have enough contractile strength, then you won't be able to move the object. So you won't be able to move your limb, or if you're trying to push something or pull something, you won't be able to move or push because you just can't generate enough force. So the way the body kind of like modulates force generation is this really, really cool principle called the all or none principle. So when a signal comes down from the brain through the spinal cord out through the nerves to the muscles themselves are divided into heaps of different little sections and heaps of little bundles. And the way I like to describe it is like if you picture like a rope and all the different like strands within a rope. Okay. And then if you look at a rope, there'll be like little kind of bundles of strands all connected together. And then those little bundles might be connected to one motor unit. So a motor unit is a nerve that connects to maybe 10 or 50 or 100 muscle fibers. So when that signal comes down from the brain, spinal cord to the muscle to the motor unit, it's going to contract all of the muscle fibers that are linked to that motor unit. So big motor units, small motor units, depending what muscles you're activating. So like your bigger movement muscles, quads, chest, lats, the big ones, they're going to probably have bigger motor units. So, thousands of muscle fibers connected to a single motor unit. Whereas your fine dexterity type movements, your fingers, they're going to have smaller motor units. So they can kind of regulate and modulate the strength and forces going into the muscles. So the kind of principle is like if there's a nerve signal that goes down to the motor unit, it's going to fire all those muscle fibers or none of them. Okay, so it's all or none. All right. So, and the way the body regulates that is in a muscle belly, you might have 1,000 motor units, and so it's only going to turn on enough of those motor units to activate the muscle to regenerate enough force to do the job that it's trying to do, either lift your arm against gravity or lift a heavy weight or hold yourself in plank or in a down dog. The body's only going to recruit enough motor units to get the job done at the time that you're doing it. So, and this is one of the ways we train and we get better, is that we recruit more motor units. So we're activating more parts of the muscle in response to the exercise or the stimulus that we're doing. So for example, one way you could modulate that would be if you start off, you do a push-up, you might only do 5 push-ups. And so your chest muscles are only going to activate enough motor units to be able to execute those 5 push-ups. And then as you keep training, then you can do 7, then you can do 8, then you can do 10. Now, a large part of that kind of increase from 5 to 10 is you're just using more of the muscle. So you're activating more of those motor units. Okay. So that's kind of like the first stage of exercise when people are getting better at things in that early phase, is turning on more motor units and just using more parts of the body. Now, if you contract harder, it doesn't mean you necessarily move faster. So it doesn't matter how hard you think you're trying to contract, it doesn't really affect the motor unit contraction. It's either going to turn on or it's going to turn off. What's going to make it be harder so you can do faster is you're just going to get more of them and at a faster rate. So that's definitely trainable. Okay, so the kind of concept here is like, if you train slow, you will move slow. The body will respond to how you train. So if you're doing a very slow, gentle flow style yoga, your motor units will be trained to that pace, that rhythm, that rate. But if you do fast, dynamic, moving yoga, then you'll have more quicker activation of motor units, and so you'll have a different kind of effect. So that could be one good way of training your yoga practice, is to do slow, mindful, intentional, long holds type practice. That's going to have a certain effect on your motor units and your nervous system. And then you could do fast, dynamic, more vinyasa flow styles. It's going to activate different types of muscle fibers as well. And then also incorporating more of your kind of like your balanced type postures in the asana. That's going to really challenge the nervous system as well. So there is a difference just in terms of the nervous system, in terms of what type of motor unit recruitment you're going to get. So for example, if you just do yin yoga, because there's really not a lot of muscle activity going on in yin yoga, and you're not trying to overcome any force, you're actually trying to really relax into it, you're not going to be really recruiting a lot of motor units. So the neurological effect will be very different in yin yoga. But if you do something like Ashtanga, which is a very strong practice, you're most likely going to activate a lot of motor units in terms of regulating strength and isometric contractions and holding positions and those type of things. So just between those two differences, you're going to get different styles of yoga. Yin yoga will be very, very gentle and passive, and then Ashtanga will be very, very more active and stronger. Okay, so even within yoga, we've got a lot of variation about what kind of effects that we're looking for in our practice. The action potential, the nerve impulse is either at full strength or none at all. So again, when that nerve signal comes down, it's not a modulated nerve signal. It's either on or it's off. Okay, on or it's off. And certainly in kind of the exercise physiology, strength conditioning world, fitness world, a lot of the changes that occur are really neurologically driven. So if we understand how the nervous system kind of is at play with movement and with exercise, we can make some other really informed choices about what's the more appropriate practice for yourself or your students' goals. What are you trying to achieve? What can you build upon? Those kind of decision-making processes. Okay, so really, really important. So let's have a look at a slide. Let me just move mine up here a little bit. Get out of the way. Here we go. So this is a really nice diagram of a muscle. It could be any muscle in the body. So you've got the big muscle here, and you can see all the different sections. So when I was talking about the rope, so like these are all the different sections within the rope. And then the muscle divides this little section here, then you get into different muscle fibers. And then it goes out further into even with the muscle fibers, you've still got smaller fibers and then sections of that muscle, and then right down to the very fine muscle fiber, which is the actin and myosin, which makes up the individual muscle fiber here. So this will be one muscle fiber and it's sectioned off. So when a nerve impulse comes down, there'll be a nerve that's connected to this bundle of muscle fibers here. So when that nerve impulse comes down, it will trigger all of the muscle cells in this bundle to contract. So you might get a nerve signal come down to the muscle, and the muscle's only going to activate maybe one section or maybe two, or even potentially subsections of the muscle bundles, depending on the type of motor units that are there. And that way, that's how the body will modulate how much force, how much strength it needs. So whether you're picking up your cup of tea and having a sip, what do we got today? Peppermint? Mint, matcha green, nice. Or if you're doing chaturanga, or if you're doing a down dog, or if you're doing some weight training, or whatever it is you're doing, that's how you will modulate just how much strength. If you think about how does a body know how hard to grip, so how hard to grip just to hold on to the cup. I mean, you stop and think about the complexity of the calculations that the body has to figure out in terms of gravity's pushing this cup down, it's going to slide down and fall to the floor. I needed just enough pressure on my fingertips that I can resist that force coming down. So through my flexor muscles here, which connect to the fingers. So just enough, but I don't want to over grip it because then I can't move. So I need enough grip in the forearms that I've got mobility and flexibility so I can actually get it up to my face to take a sip. Okay, but at the same time, I don't want to be over gripped or too passive, then I've got no control. Okay. So this really fine motor skill that happens is really controlled by the nervous system and how it kind of works in the nervous system. So if we put that in the context of doing our practice, if we kind of get out of the mind space of trying to get too stretchy bendy, and then get into the mind space of how do I want to feel in my body when I'm doing this particular movement? I want to be coordinated. I want to be connected. I want to be integrated. I want to move with breath. I want not too hard, not too easy. I want just in the middle. I want a balance. Okay. If we think about how the nervous system works, just by that kind of little mental shift, your yoga practice will change quite dramatically. So, for example, if you're in a down dog and you're trying to push your heels to the floor to really kind of get that full expression of down dog, okay, a lot of that resistance you're going to get in the back of the calf and the Achilles tendon is fascial stiffness. And there will also be some kind of like neurological kind of stiffness there as well. When I say stiffness, it says like if the calves don't have enough strength to overcome the fascial stiffness, then it's not going to do it. All right, you just can't recruit enough muscle fibers to overcome that fascial stiffness. So then that way you might need more fascial stretching. So your yoga type approach would be more appropriate because it's the fascia that's holding you back. But if you can get down there already, then you can start to work on using the calf muscle with our kind of reciprocal inhibition. So squeezing, relaxing to help open and relax the calf. But also then reciprocal inhibition where you are kind of squeezing your quads and trying to pull your toes up towards your knees a little bit, activating the shin muscles, and then relaxing to get that kind of neurological inhibition of calf, which will help relax it and stretch it out. So stretching is a real combination of like tissue quality and fascial quality and tendon strength and ligament strength. But also of the muscle strength, and the muscle needs to be strong enough to overcome the force, because if the muscle's not strong enough to kind of actually overcome the strength of the tissue in terms of the stretcher, like if you resist the fascia is really tight, muscle won't be able to overcome that force. So then you need to either strengthen the muscle or get the tissue more pliable. So these are the kind of things we need to consider when we're doing it. So it's not just stretching, it's a combination of strengthening, stretching, mobility of the tissue so the tissue slides within its kind of wrapping, its fascial wrapping, a whole combination of different things. So then we always come back to what's the goal, why you're practicing. You may not even care if you can get your heels on the ground. To me, it's not really an issue. Like if I can get my heels on the ground, that's cool. If it's not a problem, because there are a lot of other things that we're working on in yoga as well. So we're working on breath, we're working on mindfulness, we're working on integration, we're working on chi and prana flow, we're working on mental emotional state, all these things. So it's not just necessarily the physical body, which is what we're trying to really train. We're trying to train the whole body, that fully integrated body. And so When we study musculoskeletal yoga, right, we're starting at the physical level. And, this is like the foundational level, it's like the base of the pyramid, if you will. So you get that really strong, really solid, and then you can build on top of layers. At least that's the way I like to approach it. So that's a quick review or overview of the all or none principle. One thing I will say though is if you want to put on muscle mass, if increasing muscle tissue is a goal for you, it's very difficult to do that with yoga, just because the nature of asana done classically doesn't really provide the stimulus overload to the tissues to make them grow big. You'll get strong and pliable, so you can kind of get strong in yoga, but not get big muscles, and that might be what people want. Sometimes that's kind of part of attraction to yoga, is they want to be fit, but don't want to have big muscles. So yoga is kind of good for that as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. If actually getting stronger physically isn't a goal for you, I think yoga is really good, but there'll be a ceiling to it. And then you'll need to essentially think about doing other training styles. So that could be strength training or calisthenics or gymnastic strength training, where we can kind of use these principles of overload in a slightly different way. Again, it all comes down to your individual preference. Okay, thank you guys.